focus to India's startup ecosystem that also has exploded over the past decade with over 110 unicorns valued at more than $350 billion collectively being, coming up. Digital first companies especially have disrupted traditional sectors from retail to logistics to financial services.
All right, now for our next session, I'd first up like to invite our moderator for the session, the executive editor of ET Now and ET Now Swadesh, Aisha Faridi. And she will be talking about the new age of smart logistics. And she will be in conversation with Mr. Akshay Ghulati. He's the CEO, International Shipping at ShipRocket, which powers shipping and logistics for thousands of merchants. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a round of applause for Akshay and Aisha.
Hi, good afternoon, all of you. Akshay, thank you for your time today and gracing us at the India Economic Conclave.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
You know, you're what I call the dopamine effect economy, or the dopamine economy. Because as we speak, I've got 2 parcels to be delivered at my house in Mumbai. And I'm constantly on the My ShipRocket app to figure out when is it that I'm going to get those parcels.
I'm glad you have the My ShipRocket app. That is the holy grail for us.
But tell me, you know, with this whole pressure about the timely deliverables, it must be a hard job at ShipRocket.
It is essentially, logistics, it's a tough business to be in. And especially when you're a tech company, which is pretty much in between all the players in the ecosystem, from the seller to the actual 3PL partner to making sure that the customer is there with the money, whether if it's a COD order, to take the order on time. There are lots of things that can go wrong. And I think we love those businesses. That's the reason we're in this business, because complexity is a friend of technology, right? Technology helps simplify complex supply chains. And the idea is that, like you said, you have these orders coming. And it's with all of us. Like for people who have 10 orders delivered a day, sometimes they're like 10 200 rupee orders. It could be 135,000 rupee order. Each order gives you a different level of excitement that you're getting, and you want it to be delivered on time. As we speak, I have coffee coming to the office, Nespresso from Blinkit, and I hope they don't try and call me right now and say, where do I leave this? Where do I leave this? But the idea is you want to make sure that, the customer experience, at the end of it, all that matters is how the end customer feels when they get that order. That is what defines the experience, the success of the seller. Because the seller can have the best quality product, phenomenal product, but when the customer opens it, if it's not packaged well and it doesn't reach in a single piece, if it's crushed, the first experience is bad. Most likely, the customer will see the product. There's a high chance they may not even like the product, because the mindset has been that what have they done? They've sent it in a shoebox, which is completely crushed. Or if the order gets delayed, they're anyways agitated with the delivery person, etc. The knock-on effect, the seller, and it affects the SMB and their business. Our job at ShipRocket is only to make sure that we try and help mitigate. That's where technology comes in place, because you cannot do it without technology.
But tell me, Akshay, we're sort of living in this world of instant gratification, like I called it, the dopamine effect, and quick commerce really feeds that dopamine for us pretty much on a daily basis. But having said that, do you think there is this whole debate about speed versus profitability? Because there is that urgency of delivery and delivering it intact, that sort of eats into profitability. Like you said, 100, 200 rupee orders also have to be delivered on time. But how do you make money then?
You will. No, it's a question of building. It's about changing habits, right? We all used to order from food delivery apps and not pay anything. And now we're all used to paying a platform fee and no one cares. Eventually, no one is looking at that platform fee. So things will change. It's about creating habits that change. I don't know whether it's necessarily good to have 10 orders delivered to you every day, each being 200 rupees. It's not good for the environment. It might be good for logistics companies, but generally, I think consumer habits are changing. I think the way the business is evolving is there are 2 sides of our brain almost when we're ordering. There is the dopamine effect, like you call it, where I want this and I want it right now. I don't care if I'm not going to club 5 things with it. It's going to cost me 10, 20 rupees, I'll get it. And then there is the selection-based, I really like this product.
But do I really need it?
If you don't really need it, and I'm willing to wait 2-3 days for it, because eventually it's not like your quick commerce store can get the entire selection of the world there. It just doesn't work supply chain wise or financially. So there is the e-commerce selection which will always be there. What is going to happen is the 4 to 5 day delivery timelines have come down to 48 hours in tier 1 and metro cities. Again, products are being stored closer to consumers. That's also good for the environment. And the most exciting part of what we're doing on the domestic side and what we see happening is the tier 2, tier 3 economy. You can see this with platforms like Meesho that have come up. Today, if you're living in a tier 2 city in India, you have more choice than you've ever had. It's easy to sit in Delhi and, take our view of the world. But I have lived in smaller cities in India, and Amazon used to say it's going to take 7 days to deliver. And just in today's day and age, that doesn't happen, and things are changing now. And I think there is going to be two different businesses. One is the quick commerce business. I don't think it's going anywhere. The world has changed. It's only going to get bigger and bigger. And then there is the e-commerce business, where I'm looking for a larger selection and variety of products. I want it quicker, but I don't necessarily need it in 20 minutes. Now, if I'm ordering a t-shirt, how many times in my life do I need that t-shirt in the next 30 minutes? It's very few instances. Maybe I can think of one instance where I've needed it, that I need it right now. You're okay to wait for 1 or 2 days, and I think economics have to change in a way that you incentivize consumers also to wait, right? Whether it's cheaper delivery, whether it's discounts, etc., and you charge customers for quicker delivery. But in today's day and age, I think as the market is growing, everyone is taking market share, everything is a little bit confused, but things do eventually settle down, because if they don't, then companies start to shut down.
So speed, you're saying, is not going to be the enemy of profitability?
No, I think carts will get bigger. That 200 rupees will start, because people will start charging for delivery and will encourage you to build bigger and bigger carts. And we're already seeing this happening in quick commerce now. Eventually, you'll be able to subsidize those costs. I think there will be two very different parts of the business, which is quick commerce and e-commerce. And a lot of the quick commerce business will start going back towards e-commerce because it'll just be cheaper.
But Akshay, there is this whole trend of about cash on delivery. Then there are the consumers who are willing to wait sometimes even 7 days or 3 days, depending on the size and the value of the order. Tell me, what are the trends that you have seen from Shiprocket? Because I'm sure you must be sitting on a whole lot of consumer behavioral pattern data. What kind of brands are people willing to pay more for? What kind of brands are selling more? And what part of India is buying more on platforms such as yours?
So again,
or other QCOM platforms via you?
Yeah, no, I think in terms of the delivery data, etc., tier 2, tier 3 has been a clear winner in terms of their share of orders being delivered to customers in these cities. I think it's, if you look at the last 5 years, it's probably been the fastest growing segment, even for tech aggregators like us, and obviously for then the e-commerce as well, marketplaces as well as the delivery companies. I think that's been a very clear winner for us. And when you talk about categories, I think the D2C brands that we talk about, I think their reach in India has started to increase a lot because of this whole shift towards this phygital economy as well, because a lot of D2C brands now are available in stores. And if they're available in stores, more people get to try it. And as a result, that transfers onto online sales as well, because if you've tried a product, you're more willing to buy it online. So I think the two things that we really have seen is branded D2C products versus unbranded D2C products. They've grown tremendously. And tier 2 and tier 3 cities in terms of a market share. And again, it's not rocket science, but it is. But again, what we were talking about earlier, I think we're just scratching the surface when it especially comes to the tier 2, 3 cities, what we call the Bharat economy. I think that is, when you talk about online, thanks to UPI, thanks to broadband, that is going to completely explode in the next few years.
But give me some color on what are people comfortable buying online for? I mean, yes, there is the food delivery aggregators, that aside. But other than that, is it beyond BPC, apparel? How much do people buy online? And what do people buy online?
Absolutely. So if you talk about platforms like Instagram, these are not even the categories that would dominate a large part of what we sell. It would be more stuff around fashion jewelry, fashion, home accessories, where it is literally the dopamine effect. It's seeing that picture and saying, I want it either for myself or I want it in my house. You see a lot of categories which are not traditionally big on marketplaces. When you talk about social media platforms, that's where you see a lot of these sellers. And usually they end up being higher ASP as well because they're not commoditized products. When we talk about, so I'll also add one layer to it because a large part of what I do is international shipping, so it's a cross-border platform. What we see a lot of Indian sellers sell on platforms, whether it's on marketplaces or social media platforms internationally, it's where truly India has, I believe, a right to win. You know, products like Ayurveda, products like textiles, products like fashion accessories, artificial jewelry. You talk about stuff coming out of Jaipur. You see a lot of people buying stuff which is not necessarily standardized. And that's where, you know, a lot of the smaller entrepreneurs and the SMBs in India, I believe, have a very strong right to win. Because eventually, if you're selling a shampoo, you are going to be compared with the FMCG majors. Yes, some shampoos might be radically different or may claim to be radically different. But, you know, when you talk about products like fashion jewelry, home accessories, you will find it's a personal choice. It is, and the personal choice differs very, very minutely. It's not so much, it's not categories. It's literally, you know, a design element could change someone's view of it. So I think that's where the social media platforms, consumers buying there, differ completely from people buying on marketplaces. Because a lot of the more standardized, commoditized products with the thousands of reviews, that's what you get on marketplaces.
But since you did talk about Indian brands going global, and since the theme for the conclave is genomics, I must touch upon that. Because like you said, many Indian domestic homegrown
I think while tariffs have got a lot of mention in the last year, and yes, definitely things have changed. At least what we see on our platform, the share of the United States as a primary market has gone down. There's no denying it, and I think you see that across platforms as well. But what's been really interesting and heartening is the ability for our exporters, whether it's on e-commerce or B2B, to be able to adapt. We are starting to see people look more keenly at markets like UAE, Middle East, Australia, whereas initially a lot of their focus was US, UK, Europe. It was almost like Europe was a contiguous country. So if you wanted to deal in Europe, because there are a lot of compliance regulations which tend to be standardized across the EU, so you either work there, UK or US. But a lot of people are now looking at niche markets. So I think what's happened in the last 12 months is people have realized that they cannot be a one-trick pony. So if you're an export-oriented business, you need multiple customers across different geographies. I think what gets overblown this year because of the tariffs is assuming that this is, yes, it is a challenge, but this business has been facing challenges for the last 3 years because of the geopolitical issues that we are seeing, especially around conflicts. You know, there are, like ocean shipping, for example, was disrupted for a large part because of the conflict in the Middle East, because you couldn't go through the Suez Canal. So air shipping, like we all were reading the newspapers opening up every day, saying there were hundreds and thousands of trucks outside airports in India, you know, loads getting diverted from neighboring countries to India. So I think generally, we live in a world, whether it's inward, whether it's more conflict, whether it's changed, where cross-border trade has become more complex. But I truly believe that the complexity also creates opportunity, and that's where we will find new markets for Indian products, which traditionally we may not have looked at 2-3 years ago. So the Middle East, for example, is becoming the new favored destination for most of customers that we're speaking to. It was not even on our roadmap till a few years ago, and now it's becoming the first destination everyone wants to go to because you minimize a lot of the supply chain issues. It's culturally close to India, physically, geographically close to India, cheaper to send products there, and that's where we're now working with a lot of our brands to help them create markets there.
Sure, but as you explore markets and as new markets, like you said, do open up, what is the economic impact of cross-border issues? Is cross-border selling getting more expensive now?
The cross-border selling generally is expensive because you're catering to a customer in an international market. So obviously a lot of your knowledge about how to market to that customer is a little bit limited. And depending on the country you're dealing in, your customer acquisition cost, if in India it's like $10, it can be as high as $100 in some countries. So you have to learn and adapt. But yes, if you ask me about the trend of selling overseas, logistics being an important part of what is happening, storage, warehousing in international markets, along with labor costs, it's all been going up. The great part is the ASPs are also going up. Yes, not at the same rate recently as the cost, but eventually it all stabilizes. What we're finding is that Indian exporters and Indian sellers are having a much more open mind about building markets and building customers rather than trying to look at this as, oh, there's a product that sells in India for $20, we will try and sell it for $100 and make
The customer is wiser than that.
so they're now actually becoming more focused on let's build a market share, let's build a brand there, let's adapt to what the local needs are. And I think that's truly what's going to define the whole cross-border decade is you will find Indian sellers and Indian D2C brands succeeding in global markets, but you might look at those products and not recognize those products because they are adapting to local consumer preferences. And yes, the diaspora is a very important part of what we see in cross-border. Most sellers tend to follow the Indian diaspora because their first hero customers are usually the Indian diaspora.
But tell me, does global D2C now work more or more profitable for high-margin Indian brands, big ticket spends?
Yes, and the simple reason is you have a lot more ability to be able to acquire customers and spend more on marketing. So you find, if I become specific, we find products above $30 tend to have more repeat customers and tend to have more chances of success in terms of brands which are selling products between, and this is very different from China, right? Where it's the sub $10 products or $15 products that dominate sales. Whereas for our D2C brands, we find a lot of $30 to $50 products. And I'm not talking about really high ticket value products like $100, $500. But even in the mass market, Indian products tend to do well, tend to be a little bit higher priced versus what we see in other countries like China where you'll have stuff sub $15. I think it's also harder just to compete. Viable. At the end of the day, there is a large market which is already there online, and there is a larger market which is coming online and is going to come online. The fact of the matter is the reason we see a lot of the larger D2C brands realizing that they need to go towards a physical distribution channel, whether it's their own stores or whether it's through multi-brand stores, is because there is that element of getting the customer to try your product. And there are people who still want to see a product, feel a product, understand from a local, so like if you talk about BPC, they will go to the local department store and chemist and ask the person, how is this product selling? There's a large part of India that still shops that way. And there's nothing wrong with that. So eventually, every brand does not need to go digital, but as you start expanding, for example, even into tier 2 and 3, right? If you're a BPC brand, if you're a FMCG brand, you do want to be there, at least in the stores in many of these cities, not in every store if you don't want to build a full digital channel, so that people see the product. There's still this perception that if you see something on the shelf, right, it's a good product, it's a large company. Whereas if you see something online, it could be anything, right? You don't know. So the fact is, there is this assumption that offline distribution channels vet the quality of the product that they are selling. And I think it helps. But there are brands which will say we want majority of our sales to come from offline in the long term, and there'll be brands who will look at it more as a customer acquisition channel. And I think online-only brands are very viable, will continue to be viable. And after that, it's the limit of the ambition of the entrepreneur, right? Eventually in India, if you want to scale, at some point you have to go offline.
Tell me, in your experience, which are the Indian brands which have the might, which sell via your platform, you think can really go global and already are on that way?
So, okay, now let me try and figure out brands which either are on the platform. So if I talk about some of and I'll break it down by price point, right? If you talk about some of the Indian brands where I truly believe there's a perception of quality, right? Think about, leather goods like Napadori, right? It's a world-class beating product. I've been to the store in the UK, seen the store in India, world-class beating product, but niche customer. Absolutely love it. I mean, at the end of the day, someone walking in to buy a high-quality leather product should love to buy that product. You look at beauty personal care brands like a Forest Essentials. Now, a Forest Essentials will have 20 brands in India, which I believe are of the quality which can succeed globally. It's just a question of building the distribution channel. And, India does have, I believe, a copyright on Ayurveda, right? People in international markets view Indian products in Ayurvedic category as good products. So there's that part of the segment where I think India has a natural right to win. And then there is the handmade, handcrafted, unique segment, which definitely may not have scale. It's not commoditized. But we definitely have a right to win there. You talk about leather goods in general. Whether it's journals, accessories, Christmas time for gifting in the US, these are world-beating products and they don't even need to be branded. So there are niches and categories where India has a right to win. And it's no longer us competing only on price, because I think that mindset changed 10 years ago, where we were competing with other countries on India, who could produce the cheapest product. I think brands that will scale B2C globally are going to be quality products, not just cheapest products. It's actually hard to compete, in my opinion, in many categories. And B2B, of course, is a different ball game, where cost is a very important part of what makes you succeed globally.
Tell me, as manufacturing shifts more and more to India under China Plus One, you think physical ecosystems are something which are going to grow and which is something that we will need to build in India?
Absolutely. So what makes me most excited about cross-border commerce for India is the fact that we have a very robust domestic e-commerce business, very robust domestic retail business. Eventually, if you don't have that physical infrastructure supported by domestic growth, you are not going to be able to succeed globally. And that physical infrastructure is extremely important in India. And it's, again, we're scratching the surface. Like I said, we're still only delivering in 48 hours. A lot of e-commerce deliveries are happening in 48 hours, but that's because we're not catering to a lot of the e-commerce market, which we could be catering to in India. And as physical infrastructure grows, road infrastructure grows. So for my business, for example, and I'm not talking about just Shiprocket domestic, but Shiprocket cross-border, till about last year, the only option to get a product for me from, let's say, Surat or Bombay to Delhi to ship it out to New York or London was air. And it was just taking too long. But just in the last 2 years with the road infrastructure that's improved, a lot of my volume now comes by road. I'm able to get stuff from Surat, Mumbai, Rajasthan to Delhi in 36 hours. And yes, I can get it by air in 12 hours, but it reduces the cost significantly for my customers to be able to do this. So the physical infrastructure improving, big part of what we're doing. The government has launched something called e-commerce export hubs, which allows exporters to keep goods close to international gateways like Mumbai, like Delhi, or manufacturing gateways. That physical infrastructure is just starting. It's just being set up. That is going to, and this is something that China did really well. And it's literally a page out of their playbook. Things are changing. And from the domestic side, the infrastructure is all around quick commerce. I think you cannot get away from this. The infrastructure of smaller warehouses being built around cities is going to make supply chains quicker, is going to make deliveries more efficient. And all of this is going to help Indian brands become more robust, become larger, which helps them also succeed globally, because eventually India, for most brands, is going to be their first port of call before they think globally. It's seldom you find export-only brands.
I'm just curious to ask, you must be working with so many founders and so many people with new innovative ideas. What's that one common mistake that they make that the business fails eventually?
I think it's the one thing that has always struck out to me is that we all try to do too many things at once. Ideas, generally if you're a startup entrepreneur, ideas are not short, there's no shortage of ideas either in you or in your team. I think the prioritization is the biggest challenge. Every startup founder I have met has been, including myself. So if I was to share an anecdote, when Zomato invested in Shiprocket, I was running our international business, not just cross-border, but our business in Saudi and Dubai. And we had met Dipinder, and the first thing he met me after the investment, he's like, shut it down. And I was like, I'm betting my entire career on this and you're telling me to shut it down. And he's like, you have such a big opportunity in India. Why are you doing this? And as a founder, you don't like it. You're like, okay, I respect you. And
Ego hurt ho gayi.
Credit to him. Like a year later, I did shut it down and moved back because the writing was on the wall. The cross-border business in India had much more opportunity for me than those businesses. And it's going back to that same thing, which is just because something seems like a good idea doesn't mean you have to do it. Right? There is a time for every idea, and sometimes there is no time, and some ideas just should not. It doesn't matter how big that opportunity is. there is something bigger you can do or something better that you can do which has a higher chance of success. And like these are instances you never forget, because yes, I remember seething inside at that point of time and then going back and saying, boss, you were right. Cross-border is something I pivoted to and started focusing on, and it was the best decision we could have made for Shiprocket.
What's the uncomfortable truth when it comes to D2C businesses such as yours?
I think it's a tough business because you are being judged on every delivery by your customers. Think about hospitality, think about restaurants, think about hotels. Every interaction is an opportunity for a customer to judge you, a customer to be unhappy. And you have to be on your A game all the time. And unfortunately, it's hard, especially in a business like ours, in hospitality and restaurants, etc. The whole business is catered around the experience. We are catered around the experience, but we're a logistics business. The chances of things going wrong is very hard. So a lot of times you wake up only to bad news, because 99% of the good news is taken for granted. It's the 1% of the bad news that you wake up to and you start questioning, what is happening? And eventually you just have to realize that logistics is a tough business. India is geographically a complex country. Cross-border with all that's happening around the world is even harder. And what I've realized is if you can help, even issues will happen. Right? You can try and mitigate the issues, minimize the issues, but what matters is how you react to solve the issues. Rather than beating yourself on why it happened, yes, we'll do the RCA, we'll figure it out. But if you get lost in that whole concept of, why did this happen, and don't focus on turning around that customer anxiety into customer delight. And you won't be able to do it every time, but if you can do it even 10% of the times, I think that is the uncomfortable truth that I feel in any B2C business, not just D2C, but where you're consumer facing, and we are consumer facing. That is the biggest win that you can make, because at the end of the day, those customers will remember you for life. Right? They will be the ones who will be your biggest evangelists. And whether it's a seller or an end user, in both cases, they will be the ones who will be the reason for your success. Not your technology, not your investors. It is what you do on the ground that matters.
Please the consumer, basically.
Absolutely.
Bottom line.
Try your best to do it.
On that note, I'm awaiting my 2 parcels. I hope they make it on time.
Please send me your available numbers.
Yes. But thank you so much, Akshay. Lovely speaking with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Aisha, and thank you, Mr. Akshay, for that insightful conversation. A big round of applause there for Mr. Akshay.